Welcome to another edition of Church in State with Chris Farrar and Brian McCall. It's good to see you again, Chris. Have you had a good couple of weeks?
Yeah, back not too long ago from a nice sojourn at the Lake Garda Symposium of the Roman Forum. You've been there, Brian.
Yes. I hope to be there next year, I hope.
The earthly paradise. Yeah, you really have to be there next year.
Yes.
It's a place where Catholics from around the world get together and discuss topics at a very high level, and at the same time have the joy of Catholic fellowship in a place that has an incomparable beauty. Lake Garda is one of the most beautiful spots in the world, I would say. And it's a real privilege to go there every year. So, by the way, to the audience, if you see the next publications advertising the upcoming conference, 2023, sign up fast because it sells out fast.
Yes, it's a limited number of people, so definitely sign up early. Well, while you were recovering from your stay in paradise, some interesting things have happened recently. Most recently, the FBI, for the first time in history, has raided the house, the home, the private home of a former president of the United States, Barack Obama. Nope, sorry, no. President Donald Trump in Mar-a-Lago. And
he's not the president. Come on. He was never really elected. You know, the Russians stole that election.
Oh, yes, I forgot. Sorry. I forgot the propaganda.
But that aside. Yeah.
Yes, that aside.
The president with an asterisk. He's got an asterisk there.
An asterisk, right. So they stormed his house. They went rummaged through his wife's, personal clothes, I hear. They wouldn't even let his lawyers observe the search. What were they looking for? Well, they've unsealed now the search warrant, and they think that he took a bunch of papers from the White House that were not supposed to be there. Now, what do you make of this charge that they claim they're investigating? I mean, does this seem legitimate?
Well, let's talk about the scope of this ridiculous search warrant. So a search warrant is supposed to be narrowly confined to the objects pertaining to alleged criminal offenses so that the search doesn't become a fishing expedition. But if you look at this particular search warrant, in essence, it says, seize every single document created during the presidency of Donald Trump from the beginning to the end. Says that, essentially.
Right.
From January 2017 until he left, on whatever date that was.
Right.
So basically, they want every document he ever created. So it's a fishing expedition. It's completely outrageous. All the documents that were at Mar-a-Lago were transported there, not by Trump, but by the General Services Administration, which also packed all the boxes. Trump didn't pack his own boxes. It's ridiculous. He's had these documents for 19 months. If they had any national security concerns, someone might have been aroused from their slumber to figure out, hey, we have a national security concern over the ensuing 19 months. They did nothing other than visit Mar-a-Lago and say to Trump, that storage closet where you have those documents is not adequately secured. Put a lock on it. So he puts a lock on it. This is back in June. Then they come back and they break the lock they told him to put on, and they take the boxes out. This is just nonsense, of course, but it's a sign of the collapse of law and order in this country. It's a lawless regime. They don't respect the rule of law. They're not following any protocols. It's all about getting Trump. And we never really appreciated the stakes involved in the last presidential election. We knew it would be bad if he lost, but we didn't know it would be quite this bad. This is beyond all imagining. We now live basically in a lawless state. Federal government is basically a tyrannical regime, and the FBI is the Stasi. After this raid, they confiscated, what was it, Scott Perry's telephone, Congressman Perry, I think it was.
Yes.
They just walk up to him and take his telephone away. A member of Congress.
I mean, this is what you used to read about happening in Mugabe's Zimbabwe or Angola or Venezuela or Cuba. I mean, that's what there'd be stories about political opponents arrested, for political motives. But it's actually happening in our country.
Yeah, it's happening in our country. And now, what are they going to do with this material that they've seized? The 20 boxes they took. I have no idea. If I were Trump, I'd be really worried about what they might insert into those boxes, because this is the same FBI that concocted
Yeah.
a FISA warrant based upon a phony dossier paid for using foreign operatives by Hillary Clinton and the Democrats. And by the way, people should remember that the Federal Elections Commission fined the Democratic Party for having falsely represented that the money they used to pay for this phony dossier was a legal expense. They lied on a form submitted to the FEC. They tried to launder the use of foreign operatives to create a fake dossier to bring down a sitting president. They tried to launder it as a legal fee. Got caught and were fined. But that's okay.
That's okay.
They can
well, beyond that,
pay the fine and move on.
We know that Hillary Clinton, as Secretary of State, had top, secret intelligence documents, 30,000 emails on a private server at her house, right?
Some people have books by the toilet to read when they're sitting there, but she had top secret classified information. What's the problem?
And what did the FBI do about that again?
Zip. Well, actually, remember the famous Comey press conference?
Yes.
Just before the election. And he said during this press conference that, she definitely mishandled classified information. Gross negligence, he said. So he basically said she had violated the Espionage Act. And then he concludes that because of this mishandling of classified information, of course, we can't prosecute her because we wouldn't get a conviction.
Right.
After he establishes all the elements of the crime during his press conference, he says we can't bring a prosecution because we couldn't get a conviction. Apparently, he said she didn't have the intent to violate the Espionage Act. She didn't willfully commit the crime. But of course, Trump willfully committed the crime when someone else packed his boxes and brought them to Mar-a-Lago.
Right. So there seem to be two legal issues wrapped up in this. One is presidential records of a presidency are supposed to belong to the United States and be kept in an official archive. And is this atypical for former presidents to be sort of working with the archive to get the documents to them, transfer things? Is that something that normally goes on?
It's not atypical at all. I mean, there's always a question as to what the president can retain, personal memorabilia and so forth, versus official government records. But in this case,
yes,
negotiations, if there were negotiations, they apparently broke down. That's the official account. And so the FBI swoops in to retrieve these documents. Now, people don't realize, or maybe they do, that the question of classification of the documents is already determined by law. The sole classification authority at the end of the line is the President of the United States. He's the one that determines whether to declassify documents. And we're told that he had a standing order that anything taken to Mar-a-Lago while he was president to work on was by its very nature declassified. He's the one that does it. The idea that some bureaucrat could tell the president what documents can be declassified is ludicrous. He is the head of the executive branch. He is the sole final authority on classification or declassification. And remember, he ordered the declassification of all the documents pertaining to Russiagate, which they were hiding from us. He gave the order that the entire slew of documents should be published. And they have resisted that order ever since. They're still hiding those documents from us.
Wow. So again, absolutely right. There's the second issue. They're trying to make it sound like he, is compromising the security of the United States by hiding and by taking these classified documents. But he had the authority up until January 20th, 2021, when he left office to declassify. And again, it's very, typical. I can say I declassify this piece of paper, or I declassify everything in this box, or I declassify everything that's moved. And that's the way he did it. So anything by definition they found in Mar-a-Lago by the authority of the President of the United States was declassified. So
there's no oversight. The president is not subject to review of his decisions by a bureaucrat. Oh no, Mr. President, I overrule your determination to declassified. They're just making it up as they go along. And Kash Patel just got on the air today, and he said that the GSA has admitted that some of the boxes it packed and sent to Mar-a-Lago was sent there by mistake. I don't know what his source is for that, but Kash Patel is a pretty weighty authority. He was involved in he was in the Trump administration, and he was involved in national security investigations. And he also said if Trump really had ultra sensitive super top secret documents at Mar-a-Lago, why did they wait 19 months to retrieve them? And why did they wait until Monday to execute a search warrant they got at 12 noon on Friday? Did they need the weekend off? Was there a barbecue that they had planned? It was on Saturday or Sunday, and they wanted to, chill out until Monday before they executed the ultra urgent warrant to get the super secret materials. The whole thing stinks. And the only concern I have is what they retrieved is probably inconsequential. It's just an issue of taking certain boxes and bringing them back to the National Archives. But what they might insert into boxes, or a spin they might put on something, or a narrative they might craft contradicting Trump on declassification, could result in some kind of criminal charges. I find it unbelievable that they would even dare to indict a former president over the possession of pieces of paper as a technical violation of the Espionage Act, when Hillary Clinton had top secret information as bathroom reading in Chappaqua, New York, and when she deleted 33,000 emails under congressional subpoena, smashed her telephones, and worked out an agreement with the FBI where her associates' laptops containing relevant information in a criminal investigation would be destroyed by the FBI itself.
Well, I mean, it is so absurd, both the breadth of the warrant, which seems to exceed the Fourth Amendment, protections, and the absurdity of and again, we don't have what the FBI claimed to give them probable cause. We just have the warrant. But how did they get this by a judge? How do you think why do you think a judge signed this?
Well, we know all about the judge. This is the same judge who's published anti-Trump sentiments, forced him to recuse himself from another case involving Trump. But somehow he didn't have to recuse himself from issuing a warrant for the unprecedented search of the home of a former president. And this particular judge, when he left the Department of Justice, became Jeffrey Epstein's lawyer, working for the infamous Mr. Epstein, helping get Epstein's associates off on various charges and negotiating deals for Epstein himself. And this clown ends up signing this warrant. He's a magistrate, by the way. He's not a federal judge, as everyone mistakenly says.
Which means he's not been appointed by a president, not been confirmed by the Senate. He's just appointed by other judges.
He's basically a glorified clerical assistant of a federal judge.
Right.
And, if you're stupid enough to agree to have a magistrate decide your case, as opposed to the judge to which the magistrate is assigned, you could always agree to that. They have forms where you agree to let the magistrate decide issues. But he's not really a federal judge. He's just a functionary of a federal judge. So they went to this clown. Obviously, they were forum shopping. The same judge who had recused himself because of his hatred of Trump, they get him to sign this warrant. Nothing to see here, though. It's all perfectly appropriate conduct by the FBI. Again, we know and love and can trust implicitly, because the FBI would never lie about anything.
And again, just stepping back from this particulars here, if you were a legitimate attorney general, legitimate FBI, and you were going to do something so unprecedented in legal history of this country, raid the house of a former president, just even for the appearance of propriety, I mean, wouldn't you want to go to a legitimate, real judge rather than, give the appearance? As you said, you were forum shopping for somebody who, unanswerable to anyone. I mean, it just seems insane to me that you would, if you were actually legitimate, would do that. Wouldn't you just say, hey, let's go to a real district judge and make sure this all looks above board?
Well, if they'd gone to a real district judge who wasn't an ideologue and he had been presented with this application, he would have said, if he were thinking rightly, is this a joke? Really? You want me to go raid the president's home for documents that you transported there through the General Services Administration, that you told him to put into a room with a lock on it? Now you want to go and break open the lock and take the documents you told him to put under lock and key on the theory that he shouldn't have had them there under lock and key? It's preposterous. We'll just have to see what happens. But I just can't believe that they're seriously entertaining charging President Trump. It shows how desperate they are to keep this man from running. And even Bill Maher has just said, thanks a lot, DOJ. You just reelected Donald Trump, president martyr. They made a martyr
Right.
out of him.
Yes. Very
They
true.
almost, this is a revolting thought. They almost have to bring an indictment now of something, because if they don't, then it's a nakedly exposed political ploy to intimidate the president and keep him from running for office. Now, if they do nothing now, they have to admit that the whole raid was pointless.
Yep. Well, again, this is the Justice Department that thinks that parents who go to school board meetings to ask questions about what's taught to their children are domestic terrorists. So, again, I think most people who have watched this have reached the point there's no credibility there anyway.
No, nobody takes the FBI seriously anymore. These people are inveterate liars. They tried to lie a president of the United States out of office based upon a fake dossier. And by the way, Judge Collier, the head of the FISA court, when she found out about the concocted evidence in the phony Hillary Clinton bought and paid for dossier, she demanded that the FBI establish immediately procedures to keep this kind of thing from happening again. The use of fake affidavits containing misstatements of fact. And remember, one of the people involved had an email about George Papadopoulos saying that George Papadopoulos was a CIA asset, meaning he couldn't possibly be an agent of Russia, right?
Right.
So this lawyer altered the email to say that he was not a CIA asset and used that as evidence to get a FISA warrant on Carter Page.
Wow. Well, speaking of lack of credibility and altering records, let's turn our attention from Washington to the Vatican, where there's been a little bit of a storm brewing, started by, no, not surprising, Pope Francis on another one of these magisterium by comments made to press in an airplane, where he was suggesting that the church teaching on contraception, the irreformable perennial teaching on the impermissibility, intrinsically evil nature of artificial contraception, it was kind of up for debate. And there's a book out there debating it. Well, this then was followed up by the Pontifical Academy for Life, which, to be fair, under John Paul II and even Benedict, was a pretty legitimate organization. They did work towards promoting and making better known the church's teaching on abortion and contraception. But Francis had basically torn it down and remade it and filled it with dissenters. They followed up the Pope's comment by coming out with a statement on Twitter. Again, magisterium here now by Twitter. Official account of the Pontifical Academy for Life, no individual author, but with an official account. Many people on Twitter seem to think that Humanae Vitae is an infallible and irreformable pronouncement against contraception. As regards the specific question of contraception, when the moral theologian of the Pontifical University, Monsignor Lambruccini, presented Humanae Vitae in a press conference in the Vatican, responding to a specific journalist's question, he stated, under the mandate of Paul VI, that the encyclical Humanae Vitae did not express a definitive truth of faith granted by infallibilitas indocendo. So here they're trying to undermine the document that have driven the liberals, progressives crazy for decades, saying, oh, that's really not irreformable. It could change. Now, just to complete the background of this, last month, July 11th, the PAL, Pontifical Academy of Life, tweeted this to a response to someone who said, stop promoting dissent. Quote, be careful. What is dissent today can change. That's not relativism. It is the dynamics of the understanding of phenomena and science. Follow the science, right? The sun does not rotate around the earth. Otherwise, there would be nothing, no progress. Everything would stand still, even in theology. Think about it.
Well, when the Vatican, like the FBI, is another bastion of credibility, as we know. I mean, everything that comes out of the Vatican can be trusted these days. Okay, end of sarcasm. So that comment is typical of Vatican pronouncements since the Second Vatican disaster, as I like to call it. So when they tell you this is not relativism, they're saying this is relativism. It's very easy to assess these pronouncements. They weren't 100% accurate. Just believe the opposite of what they say. So if they're telling you that It's not relativism. You can be absolutely certain that they're promoting relativism. And that's the way it is with the New York Times and other sources in the secular world. The Vatican has become one of these sources that just lies all the time about stuff like this. There's no possible way that teaching could be reformed because it's a matter of the natural law involving intrinsic evil. You don't need a pope to infallibly define something as intrinsically evil. We don't need a papal definition to tell us that murder is an intrinsic evil, for example, or that adultery is an intrinsic evil, although Francis doesn't seem to think so. Morality speaks for itself. It's written on the heart. And men know, we used to call this the ethical fact when I was in college. They commonly and spontaneously recognize right and wrong and refrain or are inclined to refrain from acting wrongly. And they want to do right. And their conscience tells them when they haven't done right. Contraception is an intrinsic evil. Even Martin Luther likened it to sodomy. There's a book by a Protestant theologian named Provan, Provan, called The Bible and Birth Control, in which he shows from Protestant sources and from the Bible that contraception in any way, shape, or form is absolutely inadmissible and immoral because it's intrinsically evil. Intrinsically evil means under no circumstances can it be justified. But this Pope is determined to show through comments, stray remarks, Twitter feeds, and so forth, that maybe you can just justify it for yourself. I don't think he'll ever come out with a document prescinding from Humane Vitae. He can't, but that's not the way this guy operates.
Right. He says defending and preserving what has always been taught. Here's the opposite. I mean, that's
oh, what's that? When they say they're defending what has always been taught, they're undermining what has always been taught. And when they say that they're the guardians of tradition, they're really the attackers of tradition. It's all Orwellian now. The titles of their documents signify the opposite of what they're accomplishing.
Well, yeah, that's in everything, like you said. I mean, this week, the what was it? The Inflation Reduction Act that had nothing to do with reducing inflation. Yeah. So it is. You just have to believe the opposite. But anyway, I mean, what they're trying to do, this Pontifical Academy Against Life, which I'm going to call them from now on, they're basically trying to suggest that Paul VI sort of woke up one day. He's like, you know what? I think we ought to say that contraception's bad, as if nobody knew before. And as as he even says in that. In the document, I don't have the ability to reach any other result because this is the natural and the divine law. This is what divine revelation tells us. It accords with the natural law, and that's why it's irreformable. Not because he issued Humane Vitae. It was irreformable the day before, because it's believed always, everywhere, and by everyone. And,
this is what people misunderstand about pronouncements that have the note of infallibility. Right. A doctrine of the church is infallibly taught, not because the Pope says it's infallible. The Pope says it's infallible because it has always been taught. And all he's doing is putting the capstone on the constant teaching of the church down through the centuries. The church could never be wrong about something she has taught almost from the beginning in various encyclicals and conciliar decrees, consistently, always and everywhere, to use the famous formula. If the church has always and everywhere believed something, and I'm not talking about the novelties of the past 50 years, because that's not always, then all the Pope really does is he researches the history of a teaching. And in all of these infallible pronouncements, you see this. They do historical research, and they say, this has been taught from apostolic times, and they prove it. So the mere fact that the Pope finally says this is to be held as an article of faith is just the end of a process of recognizing what the church has always taught. But nothing this Pope teaches by way of a novelty could possibly be made infallible, even if he were to say this is infallible. He can't,
which he wouldn't, because he doesn't even think that way. But well, and again, notice that last tweet that I quoted from. They're conflating. This is very typical of modernists. Conflate disciplines and methodologies to sound legitimate, to confuse you. So they say, this is how science progresses. You think you have a theory, you think something's true, you then experiment, and then you realize, oh, that wasn't true. But they're conflating the study of natural science, where exactly that's what we do. We posit theories, we test them, and then we revise them, with theology, where theology starts with divine revelation. As you said, as even Martin Luther figured out, divine revelation gives us this teaching. And divine revelation isn't subject to experimentation. When God tells us something is true, We know it's true by his authority, not because we are experimenting and figuring out, well, do we need to revise that? And notice how they're just conflating the two, that theology should follow the method of natural science. Isn't that really, that's what Pius X warned us about modernism.
Science has nothing to do with morality. They're two separate
Yes.
disciplines entirely. Whatever science discovers cannot possibly contradict morality.
Yes.
It can, however, contradict human law. So science
Yes.
has discovered facts about children in the womb, for example, which completely destroy the argument that they're anything but human beings.
Yes.
But when science does that, of course, then we don't listen to science, because science isn't telling us what we want to hear. What they
Absolutely.
want,
What they want to hear,
I should say.
Yes. No, exactly. It's science, and this has been a canard of the radical liberals for centuries, right? From the so-called Enlightenment, which was the dark, the unenlightenment.
Here's the irony about that, and the First Vatican Council made this clear. There is no opposition between faith and reason. So true science will never discover anything that contradicts true religion. On the contrary, true science will always confirm, to the extent possible, the truths of religion. So, for example, the science of archaeology will find the fallen walls of Jericho, as the New York Times reported not too long ago. And we'll make other discoveries that indicate the truth of biblical accounts. That's true science. And true science will tell us that the child in the womb is a human being, so on and so forth. And by the way, speaking of whether the earth revolves around the sun or the sun around the earth, true science, if you believe the relativistic account, will tell us that it's a perfectly meaningless question whether the earth revolves around the sun or the sun revolves around the earth, because there is no absolute space and no absolute center point in God's universe. You can pick any coordinate system you want. So these idiots who think that it's stupid to say that the sun revolves around the earth should reckon with statements by a true scientist like a Cal State physicist who said, it's actually a much more subtle question than you think. Because it depends upon what coordinate system you pick. So again and again, we find true science doesn't contradict the Bible, because when the Bible says that the sun moves through the sky, well, if the earth is your fixed point in the coordinate system, then the sun does move through the sky. So it depends upon your point of view. And even by the way, the Pontifical Academy of Science confirmed that the question of whether one body revolves around the other, the answer provided by science goes beyond both versions to a different truth. So again,
it's selective use of science is the only way.
Pardon the digression, but I like these subjects.
No, it's true. And in fact, if you want to hear, I heard an excellent lecture on that very topic in Gardone many years ago. So it's another thing you would learn some more about, perhaps, if you went to the Roman Forum. Well, that really brings us about to the end of our visit today. But there you really have sort of exposing the lies and falsehoods of church and those occupying offices in church and state in our time, really. And that's, again, a theme I think you see throughout a lot of these programs. So goes the church, so goes the world. A truth that many saints have known, that when the church is sick, so will the world. And so it's not surprising we see these similar themes. But all we need to do is return to Our Lady of Fatima, have faith in her promises, observe the first Saturdays, and we will safely navigate through this time period.
Yeah, and to tie it up with one great big bow, everything we see today in civil society in terms of disorder, lawlessness, and the collapse of morality is the result of one thing and one thing only: the rebellion against the authority of the church that Christ established, and the so-called emancipation of the body politic from the influence of the church. That's the cause of all of today's evils, as Pope after Pope warned in encyclical after encyclical during the age of democratic revolution, which gives us the situation we see now.
Absolutely. Well, there you have it, and we wish you all well, and hopefully we'll see you in a couple of weeks. So God bless everyone.
Take care, Brian.